Hey gang, we're in the fifth and final session of our 5-session series in which we've been wrestling with some of the big questions people have about faith, about God, and the Bible. In our last session, we asked the question, is it wrong to doubt God? Now, if you missed that session, I want you to go back and check that out. But today, here's what I want to do. I want to start with a troubling thought. The thought is this. Christians, followers of Jesus, have been on the wrong side of many of the most horrific events in human history. You know this. For example, in July of the year 1099, 10,000 crusaders, they burst through Jerusalem's walls, and one of the leaders wrote that it was a just and splendid judgment of God, that this place should be filled with the blood of the unbelievers. And it was. 1.7 million people would be put to death in the Crusades. In the 12th century, the Spanish Inquisition led to 32,000 executions. In the 1930s, Nazi flags were found on church altars in German Christian churches. Christians supported segregation and apartheid, the killing of Native Americans. Christians opposed women serving as leaders. Even today, Christians in some parts stand against the inclusion of LGBTQ and their allies. Mahatma Gandhi, the Indian leader and advocate of nonviolence, he once said of Christianity, listen to this, "I like your Christ. I do not like your Christians. Your Christians are so unlike your Christ." Friends, let's be honest. When you think of all the ungodly sorts of things Christians have done throughout history, it's no wonder so many people find themselves asking, how can I follow a God who would let Christians do such bad things? They're just so hypocritical. Get this. The word hypocrite comes from the Greek word for actor. A hypocrite was an ancient Greek actor who wore masks and spoke from behind their masks. In the Bible, guess who uses the word hypocrite more than anyone else? Jesus. Yep, Jesus used that word 17 times. And every time he does, guess what? He's criticizing the religious leaders of his faith tradition. Leaders who said one thing but did another. Jesus again and again, he called people out who when their lives, they didn't reflect what they confessed, when their actions didn't match the faith they professed. Jesus called them out. In fact, in Matthew chapter 22, Jesus calls out the religious muckety-mucks of his day. He said these words, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You give 1/10 of your spices, dill, mint, cumin, but you have neglected the more important matters of the law, justice, mercy, and forgiveness. You should have practiced the latter without neglecting the former. You blind guides. You strain out a gnat but swallow a camel. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You are like whitewashed tombs, which look beautiful on the outside, but on the inside are full of bones of the dead and everything unclean. On the outside, you appear to people as righteous, but on the inside, you are full of hypocrisy and wickedness." What does Jesus do when supposedly faithful people are acting as hypocrites? Jesus, every time, he calls them out. Unfortunately, today, some Christians spend a whole lot of time trying to defend the terrible things some people have done in the name of Christianity throughout history. But Jesus suggests, instead of defending the actions of Christians who have done some pretty horrible things, Jesus tells us it's totally 100% appropriate to call out hypocrisy for what it is. Jesus calls us to raise a red flag when the actions of Christians don't represent the love, mercy, and the grace of God. Throughout the Old Testament, Jesus had a lot to say about how we are all to live our lives. In fact, a disciple is somebody who chooses to follow the way of someone else. Followers of Jesus were called followers of the way. And so when Paul was arrested and stood before Felix, Paul said, "I admit that I worship the God of our ancestors as a follower of the way," which they call a sect. Likewise, Jesus invites us to be his disciples, to follow his way. The book of James in the New Testament even stresses the importance of not just knowing about the way of Jesus. James encourages us to actually live like we know Jesus. The author writes, "Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. Anyone who listens to the word but does not do what it says is like someone who looks at his face in a mirror and after looking at himself goes away and immediately forgets what he looks like. But whoever looks intently into the perfect law that gives freedom and continues in it, not forgetting what they have heard, but doing it, they will be blessed in what they do." While it is true that often Christians have been on the wrong side of history, there are those who have followed Jesus' lead and are responsible for some of the incredible gifts, the most incredible gifts to humanity. For example, in the ancient world that Jesus lived in, children born were often not named for over a week in case the parents decided to dispose of the baby. The early Christian church helped change this practice because of Jesus' love for children. Followers of Jesus also founded most of the great healthcare systems in the world. Many of the world's greatest universities, Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard, Stanford, Yale, all have roots in Christianity. In fact, 92% of the first 138 universities founded in America were started by Christians. Some of the greatest human rights leaders of our time, Martin Luther King Jr., to name one, passionately pursued racial equality because of Jesus' teaching. Now, our question for today is this: how can I follow a God who would let Christians do such bad things? They're just too hypocritical. Remember, Jesus felt the same way about hypocrites that you do. He didn't have the time of day for them, and every time he called them out. So a couple of questions for you as we close. What struggles do your non-Christian friends have with Christianity? Do they struggle with Jesus, or is there struggle with Christians and what Christians do or don't do? And lastly, is it possible to change the perception of Christians that many unchurched people have? Again, thanks again for joining me for this walkthrough, the 5 of the most common questions that Christians have about faith, about God, and about the Bible. Thanks for joining me. Have a great one.